Hey, it's Mrs. Hebert, and I'm going to tell you guys about the Weaving Skill Builder. You're going to try to learn how to develop your craftsmanship with weaving and create a small scale weaving on a cardboard loom. And of course, that's how artists grow, by learning new materials and techniques. You're going to start with a loom like this. Although, of course, weaving can be done on anything. This is a woven cup, plastic cup. This is a CD weaving. This is a larger cardboard loom, and this was a weaving that was done on a larger cardboard loom and then taken off and becomes a wall hanging. And you can weave on a paper plate. Here's a paper plate with a tree woven onto it, or you can weave like the CD all the way around the plate. A lot of people really enjoy working in the fiber studio, and weaving is one of those sort of repetitive and relaxing tasks that can be really, really enjoyable and relaxing, that I hope you'll enjoy and come back to. So to get started, the materials you need are your little loom, a needle, a fork, and a scissors and some masking tape, and some kind of pencil or Sharpie to put your name and class color on the back of your loom. And if you're giving your loom back to me, you're going to just cross that off. If you want to keep your loom, you may. You want to start by adding your warp strings. So the warp are the strings that we weave on, the vertical parallels, and these black strings are the warp here in this case. So I'm going to have you learn those terms by labeling the warp, which would be W-A-R-P, and A comes first in the alphabet. Those are the vertical strings that go on your loom. And then the weft is going to be next. E comes next in the alphabet, and those over-unders are going to be the next thing we put on. So to start your warp, we'll start on the back with the thinner of the yarn that I have, and I'm going to tape on to the back the tail with a little masking tape. You really want to have a nice tight warp string, because if it comes off or is loose, it's really hard to weave on that. So I'm happy to check your warp once you get it on. I'm going to put my tape on the back there, and then I'm going to start wrapping my warp around from the front to the back consecutively, front to back. And notice that if I just pull right upward on this, the yarn comes off really easily. So front to back, and you're going to notice that the back of the strings, the front are nice and straight and parallel, and the back of the strings are at an angle, and that's okay. Then you're going to trim it. I find that it works better to cut if you cut way down at the bottom of the scissors there. And wrap up your yarn to put it away, please. Another little piece of masking tape. I'm going to tape it right up close to this and really press it down, because again, you want really nice tight warp strings. So those are beauties. Now I'm going to start weaving. You can use thin or thick. The key to weaving is thinking of a color scheme and maybe some patterns or shapes that you want to repeat. And because this is just developing craft, I would say definitely start with a color scheme, and maybe if you feel confident with your tabby weave, that's just a regular over-under, then you could start looking at the more advanced video and trying some of these more challenging stitches like this fringy raya. But for your developed craft, you want to make sure you have your basic stitches down. So you're going to get tangled up if you don't, if you take too much yarn all at once. So I'm going to have you take an arm's length. That's the length of my arm. And another arm's length. So that's the length of about 2 arms. It's not an exact measurement. And cut that. And if you wanted to bring this home, you could. And same thing, if you have a thicker yarn, you're going to notice that that work goes a little bit faster. So you could have a couple arms lengths of your color scheme in a little shopping grocery bag with your name and class color on it, and you can bring your weaving back and forth, but you definitely need to remember to bring it back. So now to thread a needle. This has been a challenge. First of all, this is a needle. This is the eye of the needle. So you're going to put your thread through, make a loop, and send the tail through the loop and tie it on. And that's that. It becomes a little bit trickier when you have a thicker yarn to get through there. So if you're having trouble, this yarn is synthetic yarn. There's also natural fiber that would come from, instead of being acrylic, would be from a sheep or alpaca or cotton or silkworms. If you cut that frayed end off, it's going to work a lot better to try to get it through your needle. But if you can't, a great trick is to take a little piece of paper and make a hot dog bun. You want to make sure your yarn is all the way inside the hot dog bun, not sticking out, all the way in, and then, let's see, the needles are in this big red box labeled needles in the green cabinet, the Weaving and Fiber Studio. You want to make sure that is all the way in your hot dog bun, and that just works as a needle threader and can help you get your yarn through. And again, you would just make a loop and tie the tail. And then if you just tie it once like that, it's easy to untie it, pretty easy, once you finish your row. So let's start our first tabby weave over under or under over. It doesn't matter as long as you alternate which one you start with. So I'm starting under, over, under, over. I like this needle because, and then I have to actually pick this up a little bit. I like this needle because it's long enough to go all the way across. And I'm going to pull all the way through, keep on going, until I have, that's too much, enough that I can tie a knot there. For this first row, I'm just going to tuck that right in back on the back of my loom so it's out of the way. Now I'm going back. I ended on an under, if you can see that, and I'm going back on an over. Alternating, under, and I'm ending on an over. When I pull this through, I'm going to keep going. One of the most common mistakes is that the weft is pulled too tight and you start to get this effect that this student had where these black warp strings are bending in. To avoid that, I'm going to put my finger right here on the green and I'm going to pull it through and it will stop it from getting too tight. And I have nice parallel green lines. Then as I'm going, the fork is for mashing those rows right together. And you get to decide, it's part of your craftsmanship, how loosely or tightly packed you're weaving. is going to be. But as you can see, there is a lot more room on this loom for weaving. So as I'm continuing weaving over and under, a huge question is, what do I do with the tails? Well, just like your clothing, the seams and the knots and the tags on the inside of your clothes are put on the inside because they're areas of distraction. So you don't really want to have, and I'm putting my finger here as I pull through, you don't really want to have knots showing. So you have a couple of choices. This is just a developing of craft, so you don't want your loom to fall apart. But right here I'm going to make a loop, and I can tie right around, just like I tied on the needle. I can make a loop, but I'm going right around the green warp string as well. And I can tie that once and then twice. Before I trim it away. Now I have a little bit of an area of distraction on there. The other thing you could do, and let's try it with this color. So I have an over here, so I want to go under. The other thing you can do is wait and leave your tails until you take your weaving off the loom. You always want to leave about a hand's length, especially as you're using up your line. You want to leave about a hand's length so that you can tie a knot once you take it off the needle. But if I left this tail, once I take my weaving off the loom, then I'll have a front and a back, and I can hide and tie and tuck little areas of distraction like those knots away, or even weave them right into the back of my weaving, and that's a little bit better craftsmanship. But whether you leave a tail and you're going to deal with it later, or you tie a knot to the warp string, you can just continue with your weaving and make sure that you have, when I collect your work, your name and class color. You can kind of wrap up what's left, and that you're wrapping up the yarn and putting it in the right colored bins, the thin in the green cabinet and the thick. I have more thick on the floor in a warm, cool, and neutral box according to color.